I've recently been asked about what I think of the evolving relationship and views of Americans towards Arabs and Middle Easterners. And I get this question very, very often. So I want to address it here. And I want to tell you that in my several decades of life, I have seen hate, disdain, intrigue, fascination, and honestly straight up white savior complex, which is basically when white Americans, and I say white Americans, who consider themselves true unwavering allies to Black, Indigenous, people of color, and even ethnic minorities, oftentimes feel called to protect, defend, and even fight for said communities. But they're allies sometimes for the wrong reasons, and unfortunately sometimes end up doing more harm than help. An example of this that I can speak to is the big defense that oftentimes these allies feel towards Islam and Islamic practices, which undoubtedly by Western standards are misogynistic practices, they're homophobic practices, and honestly they are oftentimes oppressive practices. Yes, I know other religions do the same, and I will focus on Islam in this particular video because that is the association I want to do, and it's the association where Americans often conflate religion and ethnic origins of Arabs. Historically, the democratic ideologies have often defended people's rights and lifestyle choices, which include religion. And they've also been critics of any lifestyle or ideology that violates human rights. Recently, this narrative has flipped. It's flipped so drastically that now we find the so-called progressive leftist norms defending the very thing they saw as a threat to democracy and human rights. So I'm not sure how we ended up here. I think that identity politics play a huge role. Unfortunately, I think that confusion and the desperate need for many Americans to find and create community has led to a cult mentality that unfortunately leaves no room for questioning, criticizing, and even refuting problematic practices. I personally have no tolerance for cultural disrespect. Let me tell you right away, I do not condone hate crimes of any kind. But I wish some parts of the world are given permission to work through their historic evolution without the US's need to influence, save, reform, control, and even interfere. Rather, focus only on leading the charge to upholding human rights violations, regardless of who or where in the world that is happening. There's a huge disconnect between the United States' political agenda in the Middle East and the American people's perception of people of the Middle East. So let me clarify that Arabs and Middle Easterners are not synonymous, and most Americans don't know the difference. Unfortunately, when it comes to both Arabs and Middle Easterners, the rights, as in the right, the conservatives' perception is often hate, fear, and degradation, while on the left, there is a conflating, a misrepresenting, and an idolizing, which, by the way, as a half Arab, I can tell you is deeply offensive because it represents all Arabs as one. It infuses ethnicity with religion, and it paints a broad brush of victimhood on a huge civilization, a society, and a part of the world that is filled with historic complexities, with triumphs and flaws, good and bad. And while Arabs often share a language, I can tell you for a fact they certainly do not speak with one voice.